My sister begged me to be her surrogate, but after I tragically miscarried, she told everyone I faked it for attention. When I called her crying from the hospital, she screamed, "You unlived him. I should have picked someone else." I said nothing. That was 11 months ago. And last week, she was served legal papers while changing her baby in a coffee shop. When my elder sibling discovered she couldn't conceive, it devastated her. I recall being beside her on the restroom floor, comforting her as she wept after her second unsuccessful IVF cycle. Not only had it cost $30,000, but it was also inflicting immense emotional strain. I wish I had understood then the extent to which her sorrow would become my obligation, because merely 2 weeks later, she inquired if I had ever thought about being a surrogate. When I didn't immediately agree, her demeanor shifted. "But you possess the healthiest uterus in the family." "I'm unsure, Vanessa. I require time to deliberate." The moment I interjected, she fell completely silent and drove home. Apparently, "I need time to deliberate" was interpreted as I am self-centered and cruel. Because that evening, the family group conversation erupted. My mother sent me lengthy messages about how I was breaking my sister's spirit. Even my sister's spouse messaged me, stating, "I hope you realize you're deciding whether or not my child will exist." It was a blend of guilt, coercion, and psychological manipulation disguised as genuine concern. I was cornered and informed I was holding someone's destiny captive. Suddenly, the notion became increasingly appealing. After all, it was just 9 months of discomfort, wasn't it? I convinced myself I would be proud to grant her the one desire she cherished most in the world. I told myself family takes precedence, so I became her surrogate. The injections were challenging. I was constantly bloated, nauseous, and fatigued, yet I smiled through it all, not for myself, but for my sister, who was radiating joy, finally enthusiastic again. I was en route to her residence for the gender reveal celebration when suddenly, a truck was driving perilously close to me on the highway. I maintained my distance, but as our gazes met, I noticed the beer containers scattered across his vehicle's floor, the distant expression in his eyes, and that's when I realized he was inebriated, truly intoxicated. And as soon as the realization struck me, so did the truck. Before I knew it, crimson liquid was seeping onto my seat, and I dialed 911. I hurried to the medical facility, but I already sensed my body felt hollow. I could feel my heart already shattered and grieving what was lost, but I still recall the instant the physician confirmed it. There was no heartbeat. I had lost the infant. I gazed at the monitor for nearly an hour, observing stillness where life had once been. But above all, I blamed myself. My fingers trembled as I dialed my sister's number, but instead of offering solace, she shrieked at the top of her lungs. "You, Anna, murdered my baby, you psychopath. I should have chosen someone else." As she continued to scream, I was too stunned to reply. I had just endured a traumatic event, and all she could consider was herself. She didn't even inquire about my well-being, not once. She ceased communicating with me that day, blocked me everywhere, and perhaps if she had stopped there, I wouldn't care. But no, the following morning, I awoke to dozens of messages from my mother and unsaved numbers. They all conveyed the same sentiment, merely variations of them calling me a piece of garbage or an attention-seeking term. You see, she had informed our entire family that I had fabricated the miscarriage for attention, that I was never pregnant in the first place. She asserted I had mental health issues and invented it all to remain in the limelight. I presumed people would discern the truth, but they did not. My uncle telephoned to say, "You're a damn disgrace," before hanging up. One of my cousins, with whom I had been close since childhood, messaged me to say, "You were born envious. That's why no one trusts you." And even though they stung a little, I honestly didn't mind, because the anguish of losing my literal child was 1,000 times worse than anything some imbeciles wished to utter to me. In fact, it made their words seem like a leisurely stroll. Yet, it somehow did not conclude there. 3 days later, I received a call from Human Resources at my workplace. Someone had reported me anonymously, claiming I had pilfered fertility medication from a family member and falsified medical documents to continue taking paid leave. I had to endure a humiliating inquiry. I submitted every document, every prescription, every message from my physician to establish I was not some deranged fabricator. That was the moment I comprehended my sister was not merely enraged, she intended to ruin me. But she overlooked one detail. She had left a trace. I possessed screenshots of our exchanges, voice recordings where she expressed gratitude for me carrying the infant, text messages confirming everything. So I compiled it all. I dispatched it to every family member who had doubted me. I presented it all calmly and systematically. I did not add commentary. I did not need to. The facts spoke for themselves. The next morning, I awoke to a knock at the door. It was some unfamiliar man. He inquired if I was prepared for our rendezvous. I furrowed my brow and informed him he had the incorrect individual. Throughout the day, this occurred 2 more times, and then I finally deduced it. My sister had created a fraudulent dating profile for me, and in my biography was my address, captioned with "available for anything, just knock." I was incensed. This was no longer solely about the infant. This was about demolishing my existence, and I realized I needed to safeguard myself before matters worsened. I promptly contacted the authorities to report the fabricated dating profile. The officer who arrived appeared disengaged, taking notes without much interest. His weathered countenance barely registered emotion as I frantically elucidated the predicament. He informed me it was a civil dispute since there was no direct menace, his pen impatiently tapping against his notepad. I attempted to explain that unknown men were appearing at my doorstep at all hours, some aggressive when I wouldn't permit them entry, but he merely shrugged and suggested I be more cautious online. The dismissive tone in his voice made my skin crawl. I longed to scream that I hadn't even created the profile, that someone was deliberately attempting to endanger me, but I knew it would be futile. His mind was already made up. After he departed, I sat on my sofa, feeling utterly helpless. The silence of my apartment suddenly oppressive. My phone continued to vibrate with messages from unknown numbers, some unsettling, some angry. When I didn't respond, the screen illuminated every few minutes with another notification, each one making my stomach clench tighter. I switched it off and simply wept for what felt like hours, my body trembling with sobs that seemed to emanate from somewhere deep and broken within me. I was still recuperating physically from the mishap, the persistent ache in my abdomen a constant reminder, emotionally from losing the infant that wasn't mine, but that I had already begun to cherish. And now I had to contend with this as well. It felt like drowning, with no one willing to extend a lifeline. The following morning, my eyes swollen and throat raw. I telephoned my friend Riley, who works in information technology. She has always been my reliable source for practical resolutions. She arrived that evening, her laptop bag slung over her shoulder and resolve in her gaze. She assisted me in securing all my accounts, altering passwords, and reporting the fraudulent dating profile. The procedure consumed hours, each website possessing distinct reporting protocols, most of them exasperatingly inadequate. She also recommended I install a security camera outside my apartment door, her voice gentle but firm. "You must protect yourself," she stated, scrolling through options on her laptop. "These are no longer mere pranks." I ordered one immediately, the most highly rated model I could afford, and Riley helped me set it up the next day, meticulously positioning it to capture anyone approaching my door. "This is messed up," she remarked while affixing the camera, standing on a chair in her socked feet. "Your sister requires serious assistance, like professional intervention kind of help." I nodded, too weary to even discuss it further. The incessant vigilance was depleting me. Riley was one of the few individuals who believed me from the outset. She had seen the hospital photographs, the discharge papers with my name clearly printed at the top. She had visited me during my convalescence, bringing soup and periodicals while I recuperated. She knew I wasn't fabricating anything. 2 days after installing the camera, I received a notification on my phone while at work. The sudden chime made my heart race. Someone was at my door. I excused myself from a meeting, hands trembling as I accessed the application and observed in real time as a hooded figure hurled eggs at my front door, the yellow yolks dripping down the wood, then spat on the welcome mat my mother had given me as a housewarming present. The individual was wearing a mask, but I recognized the distinctive purple hooded sweatshirt with the university emblem on the back. It belonged to Vanessa's teenage goddaughter, Zoe. I had seen her wearing it at family gatherings, had even complimented her on it once. Now here she was, defacing my home on Vanessa's behalf. I preserved the footage but did not confront anyone. What was the point? They would simply deny it or distort it somehow, making me appear paranoid or attention-seeking. Instead, I created a directory on my computer labeled insurance and stored the video there, along with all my other corroborating evidence, screenshots of the fake dating profile, copies of the harassing messages, photographs of men who had appeared at my door. It was becoming a digital archive of my sister's animosity. A week later, my landlord, Mr. Patel, called. His voice sounded strained as he elucidated that he had received multiple anonymous grievances about me. Someone asserted I was operating an escort service from my apartment, a preposterous accusation that would have been ludicrous if it weren't so perilous. They reported noise infractions, unfamiliar male visitors at unusual hours, even dispatched manipulated footage from the building's corridor cameras that attempted to portray me as unstable. The thought of someone monitoring the building cameras, observing my comings and goings, made me feel physically unwell. "I know you for 3 years," Mr. Patel stated, his accent intensifying with discomfort. I do not believe these things. You are a quiet tenant. Always pay on time. But if complaints persist, management company will compel my hand. I thanked him for the caution, my stomach plummeting to somewhere around my knees. I was one complaint away from eviction. That's when I grasped Vanessa wasn't attempting to triumph. She wasn't merely enraged or grieving. She was endeavoring to obliterate me. She desired me gone, homeless, jobless, friendless. This was no longer just anger. This was calculated ruination, a systematic dismantling of my entire existence. That night, I could not sleep. The shadows in my apartment seemed to shift and move as I tossed and turned, my mind racing with worst-case scenarios. I kept contemplating how swiftly my life had unraveled. Just months ago, I was performing an act I believed was benevolent and selfless. I recalled how thrilled I had been to inform Vanessa I would be her surrogate, how I had envisioned us growing closer through the experience. Now I was struggling to maintain a roof over my head, flinching at every sound outside my door. I scrolled through old photographs on my phone. Family holidays where we had worn matching sleepwear, sister excursions with Vanessa where we had shared hotel beds and confidences, birthday festivities where she had always ensured I had my preferred cake. Had she always detested me? Was I simply too blind to perceive it? Or had something fundamental fractured within her when the infant perished, something that could not be mended? The next morning, eyes gritty from lack of slumber, I resolved I required assistance beyond what Riley could furnish. I joined some online discussion boards for surrogates and women who had endured pregnancy loss. The communities were vibrant and supportive, with thousands of members sharing their experiences. I posted my narrative anonymously, careful to omit identifying particulars, seeking counsel. The responses were overwhelming. So many women shared analogous experiences, not with the harassment, but with the sorrow, the culpability, the sensation of failure after a miscarriage. Their stories streamed in, each one a testament to the intricate emotions surrounding surrogacy and pregnancy loss. One user, SuoSister28, whose profile image depicted a woman with compassionate eyes and a gentle smile, suggested I consult an attorney who specialized in harassment cases. She sent me a name, Priya Sharma. I was not prepared to litigate against anyone, especially not my own sister, but I needed to understand my alternatives. I called and arranged a consultation, the receptionist's professional tone somehow reassuring. Miss Sharma's office was modest but professional, with credentials on the walls and a desk so immaculate it appeared staged. She was younger than I anticipated, perhaps mid-30s, with keen eyes that missed nothing. She listened attentively as I presented my evidence folder. The messages, the voice recordings, the security footage, the dating profile screenshots. She took notes in a leather-bound notebook and occasionally posed inquiries, her countenance remaining neutral, though I detected a flicker of something akin to indignation when I showed her the dating profile. "This is textbook harassment," she finally stated, setting down her pen with a decisive click. "You have grounds for a protective order at minimum, possibly a civil action for defamation and emotional distress. The dating profile alone constitutes identity theft in some jurisdictions." I shook my head, my throat constricted. I do not wish to sue my sister. I merely desire her to cease. I want my life restored. Ms. Sharma nodded, her expression softening slightly. "Then let's formulate a plan. Document everything. Save every message. Record every occurrence. If you receive threats, report them to the police immediately, even if they seem dismissive. Creating a paper trail is vital. And consider drafting a cease and desist letter. Sometimes official letterhead is sufficient to make someone reconsider their actions." I departed her office with a strategy, not to assault, but to defend. I felt marginally more in control, even though nothing had actually altered yet. The burden on my shoulders seemed slightly lighter as I walked to my vehicle, the spring sunlight warming my face. That evening, I received a communication from an unknown individual on Instagram. Her name was Tara, and she purported to be part of a private surrogacy support group online. Her profile displayed a woman with curly hair and a welcoming smile, but her message was anything but warm. She sent screenshots that chilled my blood. Vanessa had anonymously posted her narrative in the group, how her envious sister had volunteered to be her surrogate, then deliberately caused a miscarriage out of malice. She claimed I had been reckless during the pregnancy, disregarded physicians' directives, and then faked the automobile accident to conceal it all. The falsehoods were so precise, so elaborate, that they almost sounded credible if one did not know the truth. I established a burner account and joined the group, observing in horror as dozens of women consoled Vanessa for enduring such a cruel betrayal. They labeled me a monster without even knowing my designation. One woman wrote that individuals like me did not merit possessing a womb. Another suggested Vanessa should initiate legal proceedings for fetal endangerment. The comments continued endlessly, each one more venomous than the last, all directed at a version of me that did not exist. I felt ill reading it all, physically nauseated by the animosity directed at me. The fabrications were so intricate, so specific. Vanessa described how I had supposedly confessed to her that I had been consuming alcohol and taking medications throughout the pregnancy. She even asserted I had admitted to being envious of her marriage and desiring to harm her. She depicted herself as the forgiving sister who had attempted to comprehend my mental health struggles but had to safeguard herself from my perilous conduct. It was a masterpiece of manipulation. The most distressing aspect was that Vanessa was gaining renown in these circles. She had been invited to speak on a podcast about surrogacy trauma. She was being treated like some valiant survivor, while I was portrayed as a villain who evaded justice for murder. Her post garnered hundreds of supportive comments, heart emojis, and offers of assistance. People were dispatching her care packages and messages of encouragement. She was flourishing on the attention. I noticed she had even secured a minor brand endorsement with a pregnancy tea company that had contacted her after hearing her account. They were sending her complimentary products to aid healing and requesting her to publicize them. It infuriated me, witnessing her profit from fabrications about me. The company's Instagram displayed Vanessa holding their merchandise, smiling wistfully into the camera, hashtags about healing and fortitude beneath the image. Without much deliberation, I sent an anonymous electronic mail to the tea company. No theatrics, no accusations. I simply wrote, "You might consider requesting Vanessa Johnson's medical records confirming her surrogacy story before collaborating with her." Then I appended proof. The hospital records demonstrating I was the one who had been pregnant, the accident report with particulars of my injuries, the surrogacy agreement with both our signatures clearly discernible. My hands trembled as I pressed send, but I experienced a grim satisfaction, knowing I was finally retaliating, even if anonymously. Within 48 hours, the tea company had discreetly expunged all mentions of Vanessa from their social media. She was terminated from the partnership without any public declaration. I felt a small sense of gratification seeing that at least someone had seen through her deceptions, had recognized the truth when presented with evidence. But Vanessa must have discerned what transpired, because she retaliated almost immediately. She somehow obtained private photographs of me during my hormone injection phase, one she must have captured without my consent when she was still feigning support. They were not flattering. I was distended, my abdomen bruised from the injections, my face swollen from medications. I appeared exhausted and unwell, which, of course, I was. The hormone treatments had been brutal. She published them on her Instagram story with captions such as, "Fake individuals can still take real shots, and some people will do anything for attention." She never used my name, but anyone who knew us would recognize me. It was mortifying. I envisioned my colleagues seeing those photographs, my acquaintances, even the barista at my local coffee shop, who always remembered my order. The thought made me desire to conceal myself in my apartment indefinitely. That was the ultimate breaking point. I had attempted to be rational. I had tried to keep matters private, but she continued to escalate, continued to assault. So I produced a 4-minute video. No names, no commentary, just dates, screenshots, a copy of the surrogacy contract with our signatures, the emergency room miscarriage report with my name clearly visible, voice recordings of Vanessa expressing gratitude for me carrying the infant, telling me how appreciative she was, the security footage of her goddaughter defacing my apartment, text messages from unknown men who had located me through the fraudulent dating profile. I posted it on Reddit with the title, "My sister requested me to be her surrogate, then attempted to ruin my life after I lost the baby." I did not anticipate much, perhaps some counsel or encouragement from strangers. I certainly did not expect it to become widely known locally first. It did not even include our city, but somehow people deduced it. Within 24 hours, the post had thousands of upvotes. Individuals from our hometown recognized the narrative. Friends, colleagues, extended family all saw it. Some contacted me privately, apologizing for believing Vanessa. Others remained silent, probably mortified by how swiftly they had turned against me. A few doubled down, insisting I was the one distorting the account. The local rumor mill was operating overtime. My phone began to incessantly buzz with notifications, text messages, calls, social media alerts. It was overwhelming. I switched it off, suddenly apprehensive about what I had done. Had I merely descended to her level? Was I now the one seeking attention? I spent the night tossing and turning, pondering if I had worsened matters, if I had merely poured fuel on an already raging inferno. The next morning, I awoke to an electronic mail from someone named Alex. They claimed to be a former friend of Vanessa's who had seen my Reddit post. The message was empathetic but cautious, as if they were apprehensive of becoming involved. Appended was a screen recording from Vanessa's private spam Instagram account, one only her closest friends could view. On it, she had been ridiculing the miscarriage for months, boasting about manipulating a hormonal expletive into silence, and jesting about how effortless it was to turn the family against me. She shared screenshots of family members criticizing me in group chats I was not a part of, laughing about how isolated I had become. In one particularly cruel post, she had written, "Imagine being so pathetic you cannot even keep an infant alive for 9 months. Not that I'm complaining. Now I can find a surrogate who isn't a complete failure." The post had laughing emojis and supportive comments from her inner circle. They were all complicit, all mocking my anguish, the loss of a child I had carried for her. I felt as though I had been punched in the stomach. This was no longer solely about her grief. This was not a sister lashing out in pain. This was malice, pure, calculated malice. And she had been planning it for months, cultivating allies, turning people against me systematically while feigning to be the victim. I compiled everything into a clean, organized Google Drive folder. Posts, messages, timestamps, medical records, everything. I did not add any commentary. The facts spoke for themselves. Then I sent the link to Vanessa's employer, a marketing firm where she was a senior manager. No caption, no explanation, just the evidence. I knew it was a drastic measure, but I was weary of being the only one facing repercussions. Within a week, Vanessa was quietly dismissed from her employment. I only discovered this because Riley's boyfriend worked at the same company and mentioned it casually. Apparently, they cited violation of company principles and concerns about professional conduct. They did not publicly link it to her harassment campaign against me, but the timing made it evident. A part of me felt remorseful, but a larger part felt vindicated. For the first time in months, there was a consequence for her actions, not mine. 2 months later, I learned through family gossip that Marcus had relocated. No one knew precisely why, but my cousin Jen, who was speaking to me again after seeing the evidence, mentioned that he had been appalled when he uncovered the full extent of what Vanessa had done. Apparently, he had initially believed her because she had only presented him with selective portions of the narrative. When he saw everything, he could not remain. I imagined him packing his belongings, the realization dawning that the woman he married was not who he believed her to be. I felt sympathy for him, despite everything, caught in the midst of Vanessa's turmoil. Vanessa spiraled online, posting unhinged tirades, blaming cancel culture and trauma vultures for her difficulties. She claimed she was being persecuted for articulating her truth. Her adherents gradually vanished, her stories dried up, the podcast ceased inviting her. The meticulously constructed victim narrative was disintegrating, and she did not know how to exist without it. I never retorted, never boasted. I simply concentrated on reconstructing my existence, steadily, quietly. I located a new apartment in a secure building with superior management, a place with large windows and a small balcony where I could cultivate herbs. I immersed myself in my work and secured a promotion, the diversion of demanding projects a welcome respite. I commenced therapy to process both the miscarriage and the betrayal, slowly unraveling the trauma with a compassionate professional. Slowly, I began to heal, the raw wound transforming into a scar that ached less each day. Some family members attempted to pressure me into reconciling with Vanessa. My mother telephoned one day, suggesting we all gather for dinner to put this unpleasantness behind us. Her voice was hopeful but strained, the peacemaker endeavoring to restore harmony without addressing the root cause of the discord. I politely but firmly declined. There are some connections that, once severed, should remain so. About a year after everything transpired, I was seated at a cafe when I noticed Vanessa across the thoroughfare. She appeared different, leaner, more subdued, her once impeccable appearance slightly disheveled. For a moment, our eyes met through the window. I thought she might enter, might attempt to converse with me. Instead, she swiftly turned and departed, her pace hastened as if fleeing something. I felt nothing, not anger, not satisfaction, not even pity, just emptiness where our bond used to be. That evening, I received one message from my mother. It was brief but conveyed everything. "You were correct. I am sorry." I did not respond. I simply closed my laptop and smiled, not because justice was served, but because I had endured. I had safeguarded myself when no one else would. The healing was not linear. Some days were more arduous than others. I still experienced nightmares about the accident, still felt phantom sensations where the infant had been. Some mornings I awoke with my hand on my abdomen, momentarily bewildered as to why it was flat. But I was progressing, one day at a time, reclaiming fragments of myself that had been lost in the pandemonium. Then one morning, I received a letter. No return address, just my name inscribed in familiar penmanship. Inside was a check for $30,000, the precise sum of the IVF treatment, and a note that simply stated, "I cannot retract what I did, but I can return what you gave." It was signed by Marcus, not Vanessa. I recognized his neat, precise script from birthday cards and Christmas tags. I stared at the check for a prolonged period, uncertain what to do with it. A part of me desired to tear it up, to reject anything connected to that painful period. But another part recognized it for what it was, an acknowledgement of the sacrifice I had made, the trauma I had endured. It was not an apology from the individual who had hurt me most, but it was something, a recognition that what transpired was real, that my suffering mattered. In the end, I deposited the check and contributed half to a pregnancy loss support organization. The remainder I allocated toward a journey I had always yearned to undertake, but never believed I could afford. 2 weeks in Japan, exploring temples and gardens, losing myself in a culture where no one knew my narrative. It felt right somehow, utilizing that money to construct something new rather than dwelling on what was lost. Around this time, I also reconnected with an old friend, Damien, who had reached out after seeing my Reddit post. He had experienced something similar with his brother, not a surrogacy situation, but a family betrayal that had left him isolated and doubting himself. We began meeting for coffee, then dinner, then more. He comprehended my trust issues, never pressed for more than I could offer. His patience was a balm, his understanding a gift I had not anticipated receiving. 6 months into our relationship, we were dining when he inquired about Vanessa. I realized I hadn't thought about her in weeks. The fury that had once consumed me had faded to a dull ache, then to something akin to indifference. I informed him I hoped she had found assistance, found tranquility, but that I had no desire to have her in my life again. Some individuals reveal their true selves in a crisis, he stated, reaching across the table to take my hand. And you must believe them. I nodded, reflecting on how true that was. The accident had unveiled Vanessa's genuine character, just as it had demonstrated my own resilience. I had never imagined I could survive something of this magnitude, but here I was, not merely surviving, but constructing something new from the wreckage. Last week, I encountered my cousin Jen at the grocery store. After awkward small talk about the climate and her new employment, she mentioned that Vanessa was expecting. Apparently, they had located a new surrogate, a woman they were compensating this time, not a family member. The infant was due in 3 months. I felt a peculiar mix of emotions, relief that she hadn't asked another family member, concern for the surrogate, a distant echo of the grief I had carried. She's different now, Jen stated hesitantly, examining a display of apples with excessive interest. The therapy helped. She speaks of you sometimes. About how she wishes she could reverse it all. I nodded but remained silent. Perhaps Vanessa had changed. Perhaps therapy and time had helped her perceive the damage she had inflicted, or perhaps she was simply telling people what they desired to hear. Either way, it was no longer my concern. As I was checking out, Jen inquired if I would contemplate reaching out to Vanessa for closure. I smiled and shook my head, the response coming effortlessly. I have my closure, I told her. I hope she finds hers. And I meant it. The most effective retribution was not observing Vanessa lose her employment or her marriage. It was not exposing her deceptions or making her face repercussions. The most effective retribution was moving forward, constructing a life so rich and fulfilling that what transpired became merely a chapter in my narrative, not the entire volume. Sometimes I still contemplate the infant I lost, not with the acute pain of before, but with a gentle sorrow for what might have been. I have made peace with that bereavement, as much as anyone can. I have made peace with many things. I do not know what the future holds for me and Vanessa. I do not know if we will ever fully mend what was fractured, but I do know that I am content either way. I survived the worst she could inflict. I rebuilt my existence on my own terms. I discovered happiness that does not depend on her approval or acceptance, and that is sufficient, more than sufficient. Last month, I commenced volunteering with a support group for surrogates. I share my account not to deter them from assisting family, but to help them establish boundaries, recognize warning signs, and safeguard themselves legally and emotionally. Every time I speak, I feel a little lighter, a little stronger. The women listen intently, pose questions, sometimes share their own apprehensions. It feels good to transform my suffering into something beneficial, something that might spare someone else. Yesterday, I received an invitation to my cousin's wedding. Vanessa will be present, of course. A year ago, I would have immediately declined, unwilling to be in the same room as her. Now I am considering attending, not to reconcile, not to forgive, but to demonstrate to myself how far I have progressed, that I can occupy the same space without allowing her presence to diminish mine. I do not know if I will ever have progeny of my own. The experience left me with complex emotions regarding pregnancy and motherhood. But I do know that whatever path I select, it will be mine, not shaped by guilt or manipulation or familial pressure, but by what I genuinely desire. And that, I believe, is the true triumph. Not merely surviving Vanessa's campaign to destroy me, but emerging from it with a clearer perception of who I am and what I merit. The sister I believed I knew is gone, if she ever existed at all. But I am still here, stronger, wiser, and finally, truly liberated. I resolved to attend the wedding. It required considerable mental preparation, but I was not going to permit Vanessa to control my existence any longer. I acquired a new garment, something that made me feel self-assured, but not as though I was exerting too much effort. The night prior, I barely slept, my mind racing with all the potential scenarios of how encountering Vanessa might unfold. The ceremony itself was exquisite. I sat in the rear, attempting to be as inconspicuous as possible. I observed Vanessa across the room, her baby bump discernible beneath her flowing attire. She was approximately 7 months along now, according to what I had heard through the family grapevine. I maintained my distance, focusing on the bride and groom instead of the knot in my stomach. During the reception, I stayed close to Riley, who had accompanied me as my guest. She kept making jokes about the dreadful disc jockey and the desiccated poultry, anything to divert my thoughts from the unspoken issue. I was at the bar, obtaining another carbonated beverage, when I sensed someone approach. I turned around, and there was Marcus, Vanessa's husband, ex-husband. I was unsure of their current status. "Hello," he stated awkwardly. "You appear well." I thanked him for the check he had sent. He nodded, looking uncomfortable, then informed me he and Vanessa were officially divorced. Apparently, after everything came to light, he could not view her in the same manner. He had relocated to an apartment across town and was endeavoring to ascertain his role with the impending infant. I felt compassion for him, caught in the midst of Vanessa's predicament. As we were conversing, I noticed Vanessa observing us from across the room. The expression on her face was not anger, as I had anticipated. It was something else, something almost resembling shame. She swiftly averted her gaze when our eyes met. I managed to avoid any direct interaction with Vanessa for the majority of the evening, but as I was departing, she cornered me near the coat check. My heart immediately began to race, my fight-or-flight response activating intensely. But she did not yell or accuse me of anything. She simply stood there, one hand on her abdomen, looking smaller somehow. "I am seeing someone," she stated quietly. "A therapist, twice a week." I did not know what to say to that, so I merely nodded. She did not apologize, did not seek forgiveness, just shared that one piece of information before walking away. It was not much, but it was something, a tiny acknowledgement that matters had gone very awry. The following morning, I awoke feeling lighter somehow. Seeing Vanessa had not been as catastrophic as I had feared. I had survived it, just as I had survived everything else. I went about my day, had coffee with Damien, worked on a project for my employment. Normal activities that once seemed unattainable during the worst of everything. A week later, I received a text message from my mother inquiring if I would meet her for lunch. I was hesitant but agreed. Our relationship had been strained ever since everything transpired. She had apologized, but there was still this awkwardness between us, as if neither of us knew how to interact with each other anymore. We met at this small cafe near her residence. She appeared anxious, fidgeting with her napkin as we placed our orders. Finally, she took a deep breath and informed me Vanessa had been diagnosed with something called adjustment disorder with anxiety and depressed mood. Apparently, the unsuccessful IVF treatments had triggered it, and then the miscarriage exacerbated it. She was not excusing what Vanessa did. She made that clear, but she wanted me to comprehend that Vanessa had not been herself. I sat there, absorbing this information. A part of me desired to say, "No kidding, she wasn't herself. Normal individuals do not attempt to destroy their sister's life." But I kept that thought to myself. Instead, I simply inquired if Vanessa was receiving assistance. My mother nodded, stating the therapy seemed to be effective. She was on medication too. As we were concluding lunch, my mother hesitantly mentioned that Vanessa had asked if I would consider meeting with her and her therapist, a mediated discussion of sorts. I immediately tensed up. The thought of sitting in a room with Vanessa, discussing everything that had occurred, made my stomach churn. I informed my mother I would contemplate it, but I was not prepared for that. Perhaps I never would be. That night, I discussed it with Damien. He listened without judgment as I processed my emotions. He pointed out that I did not owe Vanessa anything, not even a conversation, but he also stated that sometimes these mediated discussions can provide resolution. The decision was entirely mine. I spent the next few days pondering it. I created a pros and cons list, like some sort of middle schooler attempting to decide whether to attend a dance. In the end, curiosity prevailed. I desired to hear what Vanessa had to say. I wished to know if she truly understood the damage she had inflicted. So I agreed to one session, with conditions. It would be on my terms, at a time that suited me, and I could depart at any point if I felt uncomfortable. The day of the meeting, I was a nervous wreck. I changed my attire 3 times, as if what I wore would somehow shield me. Damien drove me to the therapist's office and waited in the vehicle, my safety net if matters deteriorated. The waiting room was quiet, just the sound of a white noise machine and soft classical music. When the door opened, I saw Vanessa already seated inside. She looked up when I entered, her eyes red-rimmed as if she had been weeping. The therapist, Dr. Chun, explained the fundamental rules. This was not about forcing reconciliation or forgiveness. It was about communication and comprehension. Vanessa would speak first, then I would have an opportunity to respond. We could take breaks at any time. Vanessa commenced by acknowledging everything she had done, not in vague terms, but specifically. The fraudulent dating profile, the falsehoods to family, the harassment at my workplace, the photographs she had shared without permission. She did not offer excuses or attempt to minimize it. She simply laid it all out, her voice trembling at times. Then she elucidated what had been transpiring in her mind. How after the second unsuccessful IVF, something fractured within her. How when I lost the infant, all she could perceive was another failure, another thing taken from her. She had fabricated this narrative where I was the antagonist because it was simpler than confronting her grief and disappointment. The more people believed her, the more real it became in her mind. It was as though she had convinced herself of her own deceptions. I desired someone to blame, she stated, tears streaming down her face, and you were present. I sat silently, allowing her words to sink in. When it was my turn to speak, I found it difficult to locate the appropriate words. I informed her how terrified I had been, how isolated, how betrayed by not just her, but everyone who believed her without question. I told her about the nights I could not sleep, flinching at every sound outside my door, about the mortification of defending myself against accusations that never should have existed. You didn't just assault me, I stated. You attempted to erase me. She nodded, not denying anything. The therapist guided us through the conversation, interjecting when matters became too heated or when one of us required a moment. It was not some magical healing session. There were no embraces or tearful reconciliations like in motion pictures, just 2 fractured individuals attempting to comprehend how we had arrived at this point. At the conclusion of the session, Vanessa inquired if I would contemplate meeting again. I informed her honestly that I did not know. I required time to process everything. Dr. Chin suggested I take as much time as I needed, that there was no haste or coercion. I departed feeling emotionally drained, but somehow clearer, as if a mist had dissipated. Over the next few weeks, I reflected extensively on that session, on Vanessa's explanation, and whether it altered anything for me. I discussed it with my own therapist, endeavoring to sort out my emotions. The anger was still present, but it was not as all-consuming as before. It had edges now, boundaries I could discern. I decided to meet with Vanessa and Dr. Chin one more time, not for Vanessa's sake, but for my own. I had inquiries that still required answers, matters I needed to articulate to fully move onward. The second session was distinct, less emotional, more practical. We conversed about boundaries, about what any future relationship between us might resemble. I made it explicit that trust would have to be reconstructed from the ground up, and that might require years, if it occurred at all. Vanessa gave birth to a healthy baby boy a month later. My mother sent me a photograph, inquiring if I wished to visit. I was not prepared for that. I sent a present, a soft blanket and a card that simply stated, "Congratulations." But I maintained my distance. Some wounds were still too fresh. Life continued. Damien and I moved in together, combining our book collections and good-naturedly disputing whose coffee maker to retain. I received a promotion at work, assuming a leadership position I had been coveting for years. I continued volunteering with the Surrogate support group, sharing my narrative to assist others in safeguarding themselves. 6 months after our therapy sessions, Vanessa texted me directly for the first time. She inquired if I would be willing to meet her for coffee, just the 2 of us, no mediator. I was astonished by how long I stared at that message, uncertain how to reply. Finally, I agreed to meet at a public establishment, a cafe equidistant between our residences. She was already present when I arrived, seated at a corner table with her infant asleep in a carrier beside her. She appeared fatigued but calmer than I had seen her in years. We engaged in awkward small talk at first, the weather, my new employment, her adaptation to motherhood. Then she reached into her bag and retrieved an envelope. "I've been working on this with Dr. Chun," she stated, sliding it across the table. You don't have to read it now, or ever if you don't wish to. It was a letter, 8 pages, handwritten, a genuine apology, not the kind that states, "I'm sorry you felt that way," but one that assumed full accountability. She detailed everything she had done, acknowledged the pain she had inflicted, and outlined the measures she was undertaking to ensure she never repeated such actions. No excuses, no justifications, just responsibility. I read it twice, sitting there in the cafe while my coffee grew cold. It did not magically rectify everything, but it mattered. It was the first time I truly believed she comprehended the impact of her actions. "Thank you for this," I stated finally, folding the letter carefully. "It means a great deal. We did not embrace when we parted ways. We were not prepared for that. But there was a moment just before she departed when she looked at me and stated, 'I miss who we used to be.'" I nodded because I missed that too. Not enough to pretend the past year hadn't transpired, but enough to leave the door ajar, just slightly. Over the next year, we constructed something new. Not the intimate sisterhood we once shared, but something more circumspect. Coffee every few weeks, brief messages about trivial matters. She respected my boundaries, never pressed for more than I was willing to provide. I met her son properly, held him while she prepared us lunch. He possessed her eyes, but none of her sharp characteristics. The family slowly healed too. Holiday gatherings became less strained, though there were still moments of awkwardness. Some relatives never fully grasped what had transpired between us, preferring to believe it was merely a misunderstanding that escalated. I permitted them to think what they wished. The individuals who mattered knew the truth. Damien proposed on our 2-year anniversary. Nothing extravagant, just the two of us on the balcony of our apartment, surrounded by my flourishing herb garden. I accepted immediately. When I telephoned my mother to share the news, she inquired if Vanessa would be in the wedding party. I informed her no, that was not where we were yet, perhaps never would be. She accepted that without argument, a small triumph in itself. Last week, I encountered Marcus at the grocery store. He was faring well, dating someone new, still co-parenting with Vanessa. He mentioned that she speaks of me sometimes, about how much she regrets what occurred. "She's not the same person," he stated, loading apples into his shopping cart. "The therapy changed her." I believe that is true. People can change if they desire to intensely enough. But change does not erase consequences. It does not undo damage. It merely establishes a new starting point, a different trajectory forward. Sometimes I contemplate the infant I lost, not with the sharp agony of before, but with a gentle sorrow for what might have been. I have made peace with that loss, as much as anyone can. I have made peace with many things. I do not know what the future holds for me and Vanessa. I do not know if we will ever fully repair what was shattered. But I do know that I am fine either way. I survived the worst she could do. I rebuilt my existence on my own terms. I discovered contentment that does not depend on her approval or acceptance. And that is sufficient, more than sufficient.